On the morning of December 2nd of 1805, history would witness one of the greatest military feats ever orchestrated. A single battle that displayed the genius of one man who had risen from obscurity to become the Emperor of France. That man was Napoleon Bonaparte. And the event? The Battle of Austerlitz, often called the Battle of the Three Emperors, a clash that reshaped Europe's future and solidified Napoleon's place in history as a military mastermind. But what exactly made Austerlitz such a triumph? How did Napoleon manage to outwit two powerful empires and crush their armies in just a single day? Today we're going to explore the intricacies behind this monumental battle and why it's still considered Napoleon's greatest victory. Setting the stage, the Third Coalition. Let's rewind for a moment. By the early 19th century, Europe was in turmoil. The French Revolution had overturned the old world order, and by 1804, Napoleon had declared himself the Emperor of France. His ambition for expansion and dominance worried the established monarchies across Europe, and in response, Britain, Austria, and Russia, under the leadership of Tsar Alexander I, formed the Third Coalition in a bid to stop Napoleon's conquests. Napoleon's victories across Europe had made him a feared figure, but the coalition believed that with enough combined force, they could overpower him. Austria and Russia decided to launch a joint offensive in Central Europe, seeking to crush Napoleon's forces in a decisive blow. Meanwhile, Britain supported them from afar with financial aid and naval power. Napoleon, on the other hand, had no intention of merely defending his gains. He was planning something far more audacious. Napoleon's strategic brilliance. Now, this is where Napoleon's genius really shines. Rather than merely react to the coalition's movements, Napoleon devised an elaborate plan. He intentionally made it seem as if the French army was vulnerable. His forces appeared weakened and spread thin, giving the illusion of vulnerability to draw the Allies into a trap. Napoleon knew that his enemies, seeing his apparent weakness, would want to strike decisively. At the heart of this strategy was the battlefield of Austerlitz itself, located near the town of Brno in modern-day Czech Republic. Now, this ground would become the stage for his masterpiece. One critical feature of the terrain was the Pratzen Heights, a strategic ridge that overlooked much of the battlefield. Control of these heights would be key to winning the battle. The Allied forces, led by Emperor Francis II of Austria and Tsar Alexander I of Russia, saw the same importance in the Pratzen Heights, and they planned their attack around it. They believed that Napoleon's right flank was weak and could be exploited. However, that was precisely what Napoleon wanted them to think. By appearing vulnerable on his right, he invited them to commit their forces in that direction, leaving themselves a bit exposed. The battle begins December 2nd of 1805. As dawn broke on December 2nd of 1805, thick mist hung over the battlefield. The fog of war was not just metaphorical, it was literal. The Allied forces moved first, launching their assault on the French right flank, exactly as Napoleon had predicted. They believed they were on the verge of victory. However, unbeknownst to them, this was merely the opening act of Napoleon's plan. Napoleon allowed the Allies to advance into the low ground, seemingly ceding the initiative. They pushed forward, encouraged by the lack of strong resistance, and as the fog began to lift, the French emperor was ready to spring his trap. Napoleon gave the signal for his central corps, led by Marshal Soult, to counterattack and retake the Pratzen Heights. It was a decisive move, catching the Allied forces completely off guard. The French soldiers surged up the slopes of the heights, overrunning the Allied positions and securing the high ground. Napoleon had timed this perfectly. While the Allies were still committed to their assault on the French right flank, Napoleon's forces cut through the center like a blade. The coalition's lines were now hopelessly divided, with their forces scattered and disoriented. The collapse of the Allied forces. What followed was nothing short of a disaster for the Austro-Russian forces. As the French forces swept across the Pratzen Heights, the Allied center crumbled. Units began to fall back in confusion, but there was nowhere to retreat. Napoleon had outmaneuvered them so completely that their entire battle plan fell apart within hours. And to make matters worse for the Allies, the French forces had now surrounded large portions of their army. One particularly disastrous moment occurred at the frozen Sachkin Lakes. As some of the retreating Allies tried to flee across the lake, French artillery fire shattered the surface, sending hundreds of soldiers plunging into the icy waters below. The scene was chaotic, and it only added to the demoralization of the Allied forces. By mid-afternoon, the battle was all but over. The once proud coalition army had been routed, with thousands of its soldiers killed, wounded, or captured. Napoleon's army had won a decisive and crushing victory. In the space of just one day, the Third Coalition had been shattered. The aftermath, a new map for Europe. The victory at Austerlitz was more than just a tactical triumph. It reshaped the political landscape for Europe for years to come. Following that battle, Austria was forced to sue for peace, signing the Treaty of Pressburg in late December of 1805. This treaty ended Austria's role in the Third Coalition and significantly weakened its influence in Europe. Napoleon now controlled much of Central Europe and had solidified his dominance over the continent. Perhaps more notably, the victory at Austerlitz led to the dissolution of the centuries-old Holy Roman Empire. Napoleon reorganized the German states into what became known as the Confederation of the Rhine, a collection of client states under French influence. This marked the end of a millennium-long political institution, further demonstrating the far-reaching consequences of Napoleon's military genius. Napoleon's masterpiece, lessons in tactics. So, what made Austerlitz so remarkable from a military perspective? Well, first and foremost, it was Napoleon's use of deception. By feigning weakness, he lured his opponents into making crucial mistakes. The Allies believed that they had the upper hand, but in reality, they were walking into a trap. Napoleon also demonstrated the importance of timing. He waited for the perfect moment to launch his counterattack, striking just as the Allies were overextended and vulnerable. His ability to coordinate different elements of his army in such a fluid and decisive way was truly revolutionary. Moreover, Napoleon understood the significance of terrain better than his opponents. By controlling the Pratzen Heights, he gained a critical advantage, allowing him to dominate the battlefield. His mastery of battlefield dynamics turned what could have been an ordinary battle into a masterpiece of military strategy. The legacy of Austerlitz. The Battle of Austerlitz is often regarded as the pinnacle of Napoleon's military career. It showcased not only his brilliance on the battlefield, but also his ability to shape the broader geopolitical landscape of Europe. In one fell swoop, Napoleon had destroyed the Third Coalition and reasserted France's dominance over the continent. However, this victory also marked the beginning of the end for Napoleon. While Austerlitz solidified his power, it also fueled his ambition, driving him to pursue even riskier campaigns. Within a decade, his empire would crumble under the weight of overextension and resistance from the rest of Europe. Yet, even after his downfall, the legacy of Austerlitz endures. Military historians and tacticians continue to study this battle, drawing lessons from Napoleon's use of deception, timing, and terrain. Austerlitz remains a shining example of how a single battle can change the course of history. And conclusion. Now, the Battle of Austerlitz was more than just a military victory. It was a turning point that reshaped Europe. Napoleon's ability to outthink and outmaneuver his enemies on such a grand scale earned him a place among history's greatest commanders. Austerlitz is often referred to as Napoleon's masterpiece, and for good reason. It was a battle where intelligence, strategy, and audacity converged to create a triumph that would echo through the ages. So what do you think? Was Austerlitz truly Napoleon's greatest victory? Well, let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into history's defining moments.